Morning. It's time for Advent reflection on the 3rd of December. So I've got my box here. I've got my Christmas tree ready and my snowman. Unfortunately, he's lost an eye, which is a bit of a shame. So I'm not sure where that's gone, but have a little search. That's one of the joys of having a cat and two little children. So in my box this morning, I have got my thermostat. It's very exciting. Today we are looking at a thermostat. So my reason for doing that today, I'm looking at the parable of the wise and the foolish builders. I don't know whether you know the story. Do look it up. But it comes at the end of Matthew 7. It's a parable where Jesus talks to us about two people. They are both building houses, and one of them, the builders kind of choose where to construct the houses. One of them chooses to construct their house on a rock. The other chooses the sand to construct their house. And I love Jesus's parables because I think they usually have quite a few different meanings, and this is just one of the meanings of this parable. There are so many meanings of this parable. But when we think about UK sand, I don't know about you, but I've always thought, I'm honestly not sure how they could even begin to build a house on sand. How on earth would you get the bricks to balance? You know, even walking on sand is a bit challenging. And it kind of sounds as though a little bit of common sense would tell you that that is fairly difficult, if not completely impossible. But in a Middle Eastern context, the sand actually looks really, really different. It's a bit more like clay. When the sun's baked and hardened it, it looks just like rock. So it's almost like it's fake rock, as it were, that it looks like rock, but it actually behaves totally differently. So the baked sand is often called bronze because the sun hardens it so much. It feels like rock, it looks like rock, and during the summer, it acts like rock completely. But the true consistency is much more like clay. And on face value, I think the houses therefore look quite similar until the torrential rains came. So the torrential Middle Eastern rains, they came, and when anything was based marginally on sand, it got completely washed away. So this takes me to my thermostat. We bought our house 3 years ago. It's a section of a converted barn. It was built in 1800. I'm sure you can imagine the building regulations in 1800 were somewhat different, let alone a building that it was built primarily for animals to live in. So when we went to have our boiler service, it was obviously renovated and sort of built up, but when we went to have our boiler serviced, we found out that while the previous owners had owned the house, the boiler had leaked and completely flooded the house. There was a huge crack in it, and they'd essentially just kind of put a sticking plaster over it. So the boiler, it was only 7 years old, so we thought, you know, it's going to be okay. It looked fine on the outside, but as soon as you opened it up and you saw the corrosion, the cracks, it became really obvious that the boiler hadn't stood the test of time. So we replaced it. Financially, really costly. Aesthetically, we had nothing to show for it. No one comes to your new house and says, "Oh, what a lovely boiler." They look at curtains, at wallpaper, at carpets, don't they? They look at the fluffy things on the surface, but they don't look at things like the boiler. And just like the inside of our boiler, it was corroded, it was cracked, it was rusty. It was a complete disaster, but from the outside, it looked completely fine. Our foundations in ourselves can also remain unseen. We can all fake it for a while, just like our boiler did. But as soon as we're challenged, we're prodded, we're poked, things go wrong. Our true character comes out pretty quickly. Society tells us how we appear externally is what matters, but Jesus tells us that what matters is what goes on in our hearts and in our minds. He says it does matter. Our behaviours are born out of the state of our hearts, the state of our characters. He's saying the fluffy stuff that looks good, at the end of the day, it doesn't keep us standing. it doesn't support us in a crisis. It might be nice to have, but if the boiler flooded the house, it's all going to be ruined anyway. So the rock is Jesus. Foundations can always be restored. Let's stand on the rock of Jesus' attitude, his character, who he is, and become more like him, rather than basing our foundations on the sand of the world's promises. The attitude of our hearts, our character, is more important than anything else. What's behind our actions? Are we reacting out of spite? Are we seeking revenge? Or are we abounding in grace? Jesus demonstrates the character he wants us to develop: gracious, forgiving, hospitable, generous, abounding in love. And we're transformed by what we spend time doing. So let's become like Jesus and allow him to shape our character. Let's be family together in digging deep foundations into the rock of Jesus, his character, who he is. Let's be shaped together as family by his unconditional love. Amen.